Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to our Short Sharp Stories workshop. And thanks so much to All About Writing. Trish is with us today, making sure that everything runs smoothly. And I'm so grateful to All About Writing for doing all this background work to make sure that we can run these fantastic workshops. Well, we hope it's a fantastic workshop. But from my side, I really hope that I can give you some guidance as to how to write a short story and also how to unpack the theme. So I suggest you keep your videos on, but please make sure that you mute yourselves. Ask any questions you would like to in the chat at any time, and we will attempt to answer those, but probably only towards the end of the webinar. And yeah, so as we've advertised, it's going to be a kind of immersive event where you are going to be writing quite a little bit. So I hope that you have got your pens, and if you don't have pen and paper, then make sure that you've got a screen to write on. And I'm not fussy about whichever way you choose. So I'm going to spend just 10 minutes or so on short stories and unpacking the theme, and then we're going to start writing. What is a short story? George Sanders, in his book A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, when asked of the unique characteristics of a short story, and particularly the difference between a novel and a short story, said a novel is long and a short story is short. So one can go into all sorts of theory about the short story, but the time for that is not this webinar. We really want to try and bring some writing skills to you in this time. So I'm going to do just a very brief recap, is that a short story generally has a limited number of characters. It has a limited setting. There's not much backstory included. You, the writer, keep the narrative drive moving forward by creating scenes and conflict between the characters. And it's often mirrored within the characters, but it's within a very specific time frame, usually over a short time frame, maybe a day. It can stretch longer than that, of course, but it's not like a novel where one can include the entire backstory of every character and take detours to explain their motivation. A short story really gets pretty much to the point. So again, please do send in your questions. Some of you might have attended the Q&A that we did, I think it's a week ago now. And I hope that you remember some of what we said then. So what we're going to do now is basically just head straight into unpacking the theme. You're here, I take it, because you would like to submit a short story to our new competition, which is Power, Light the Dark. And the reason we started this webinar with that beautiful song of Lyra is that I heard it the other day and I just found it so uplifting. And I just thought this for me is what power is about, is that sense of being uplifted in some way. And when I watched that video, some of you might have missed it, so please do go and find it or view it on the recording when you get the recording. It is really, it is about music. It shows Lyra in her power. It shows the audience in their power. It shows the audience responding to her words. And I just thought for a moment, I felt powerful listening to that. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is that what I'm hoping is that in some way, writing your stories will underscore and reveal a sense of power in yourselves. So just to get back to yourselves, close your eyes for a moment, settle into your body, breathe in calm, breathe in your own capability, breathe out any anxieties you may have brought with you. Sometimes we're in a rush to get to a workshop.
Bye-bye.
Hello. Oh, the kitty. Is the kitty there? Yeah, so just, you can see what I mean. Life intrudes. So just for these couple of hours, be in your room, be with your own thoughts, be with your writing process. breathe out any worries you might have. Breathe out any anxiety. Everything can wait until the session is done. And consider this, that you, the writer, are the vehicle for the download. Your brain has collected memories and images over time, and it's saying, I've got something to show you about your own experience, about your own times, about power. So trust your own creative process. And remember that these exercises are just for you, for your eyes only. It's really practice at exploring the elements that are needed in creative writing. And hopefully we'll unlock some ideas that you can work on in your own time. And hopefully you'll be a little bit more informed as far as the theme goes. And it's an opportunity to send in your questions about the theme or anything you want to know about creative writing. Okay, so open your eyes, and what we're going to do is, for our first exercise, we're going to write around 8 minutes or so. These are timed exercises. So you'll hear a little alarm going off, and that means your writing time is over for that particular exercise. But it's really just so you can just let go and free write. And some of you might know what free writing is, but it is really just about allowing yourself permission to write whatever comes to you as you're writing. Clearly, you don't want to go in too many directions. Stay on the prompt, on the theme that I'm going to give you to write about. But just allow the writing to come without judgment, without editing. Whatever comes, it's fine. And at the end of it, even if you've managed a few sentences that you're pleased with or that have unlocked something, then that's good enough for now. So in writing, what I always stress with fiction is that we write for emotion. And I think this speaks to memoir as well. But if we want to write for information, we're going to turn to nonfiction books. We're going to turn to instruction manuals. If we are turning to fiction, it's often because we want to immerse ourselves in someone else's world. We want to immerse ourselves in something that is written with feeling, something that is imbued with emotion. And I feel in order to write authentic fiction, we need to understand that emotion, which we then transcribe to our characters. We give our characters that emotion. And as we say in All About Writing, for us, story really begins with character. We want strong characters, characters who feel, in order that we ourselves as readers can feel what those characters are going through. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we explore character later. But for now, what I'd like you to do is to focus on your own power. And I'm hoping maybe that Lyra song unlocked something for you. So focus for the next 8 minutes or so on what power means to you. What do you think of when you think of power? Write whatever comes to mind. What images come to mind? Just as a few examples, I love the sound of my car when I rev the engine. Or if singing brings you power, listening to a choir, that sense of upliftment, perhaps you can, that might be something, one of your images that comes to you. The power of sport. I'm just thinking of the Rugby World Cup wins. Everyone standing with flags around their shoulders and swathes of face paint in the colors of the South African flag. Where do you feel the power? Where do you feel it in your body? And I think, this is important when it comes to fiction, is to locate this feeling in our body so that we can also write about it authentically. Perhaps power brings up an electricity storm or load shedding or a weightlifting contest. I really want you to try and be free as to what power means to you. Try and stick to the images and sensation and experiences of power in the positive sense of the word, particularly as the secondary qualifier of our competition is light the dark. So with that, perhaps start with the prompt, I feel powerful when, or power means to me, write, and write about power and write wherever it takes you. And I will see you on the other side of 8 minutes. You'll hear my lovely little alarm, the night owl, bringing you back into the room. Thank you. See you on the other side of 8 minutes.
Well, I cannot hear anything. I don't see anybody speaking. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't get rid of this microphone thing.
Okay. Hi, Anna Marie.
Oh,
Okay. Here's my little alarm.
okay. I
Okay.
can hear now you, Joanne.
Yes. All right. So, hello, everybody. We've come back into the room. What we are doing for those late comers, because this is an kind of immersive workshop, it's going to be a lot of writing for you all. So I'm going to do minimal speaking. I hope it's minimal speaking. And then I'm going to allow you to write for around 8 minutes at a time, because I really believe that our ideas come through the writing. So I could sit here and just talk for the next 2 hours, but I don't think that would be incredibly helpful to you. I think it is just a far better way to learn about writing, to actually write. And even for the seasoned writers who've joined us, what we're doing is we're unpacking the whole idea of power and what it means to us. So we're just unpacking the theme of the competition. And then later in the workshop, we're going to basically begin to write a short story. So if anyone has not been able to hear anything, it's because you've all been busy writing away. And what we've been doing is just writing about what power means to us in a positive sense, when we feel powerful, what images come to us that are about power. Because we can't just sit down and write a story about power, asking the Lord perhaps for inspiration. The Lord sometimes just doesn't provide. So the way to get inspired is to start writing about it. And the way to get inspired about a theme is first to write a little bit about the theme. So if you have missed the section on power, I'm going to just admit someone else, then just go back to that exercise and write about what power means to you. But what we are going to do now for the next part of this exercise is to write on powerlessness. Because how can we write about power without having an understanding of being without power? So whether that is having no light during load shedding or being in an abusive relationship, we need to interrogate that powerlessness and what it means to us. We also bring in another dimension then as to how we think about power. So at this stage, we're not even really thinking about characters or what story we're going to write. We are basically just coming to terms with the theme and what it means to have power and also to be without power. So again, I want you to write about powerlessness. What scenarios come to mind? What images come to mind? If you're a bodybuilder, for example, it could be when you first started out and had no muscles. My son is one of those. He keeps on sending me these videos of him in the gym, and he used to be a very skinny little dude, and now I think he's doubled his weight in muscle. And I'm mentioning that as an example because what I'd like you to do is think out the box, think of power out the box. It doesn't just have to be load shedding. Yet remember those times in load shedding when we did feel powerlessness, when we had a chicken roasting in the oven and suddenly 20 minutes into the process, all the lights went off without warning. That sense of, it's happened again. That's a certain powerlessness. Again, think of that extreme experience. Perhaps some of you went through this, the apartheid experience of not having a vote. I mean, imagine that extreme sense of powerlessness that so many of our citizens must have experienced and have felt. So again, in order to light the dark, we need a sense of what is the dark. This might be difficult for you, but I think it is an important thing to think about, just to kind of balance the whole idea of power, or as I said, to interrogate it. So again, we're just going to write for 8 minutes or so. I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'm going to see you in about 8 minutes. Again, just free yourselves, allow yourselves to to write about powerlessness. I'll see you in 8 minutes. Okay, welcome back to the room, everybody. Just take a deep breath. Sometimes these exercises can bring unexpected feelings to the foreground, but as writers, that is what we're here to interrogate, and that's what we want to imbue our stories with, the sense of emotion, the sense of authenticity. So for those who have come in a little bit late, we have written about what power means to us, and we've just written about what powerlessness means to us, how we feel in both of those states. And because you're here to work, we're going to go straight on to another exercise, which is to look at power imbalances. Now, this brings us closer to story because a power imbalance indicates that there are two or more people. So if there's a power imbalance between people, what does that look like? If it's within yourself, within your characters, what does that feel like? There can be underlying issues of power within ourselves, within our characters, but how do they show themselves with other people? So again, just a few examples: a husband yelling at his wife, or vice versa, a sugar daddy and his sweetheart. Is the sweetheart the powerful one, or the sugar daddy the powerful one? Dark and light, watching the sunrise. Could one call that a power imbalance? Probably not, but it does indicate some kind of shift, some kind of lighting the dark. When it comes to characters, money, age, religion are often at the root of power, and the power imbalances are often a result of that. So, just other examples I can think of are bullying and the victim, a daughter and an overbearing mother. So again, I'd like you to just free write into the whole idea of power imbalances, and bearing in mind that this does move us closer to story because there are two people involved. So again, just let yourself free write whatever ideas come to you, just explore it, see where it goes. And I'll see you on the other side of 8 minutes. Just keep the pen flowing and allow the ideas to surface. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So just finish off your sentence and then come back to the room. Hope that has loosened up some ideas for you. That's really what we want to try and do, is just go into ourselves as writers and to interrogate our own values and our own feelings about things, so that when it comes time to imbuing our characters with feeling, we can do it authentically. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do another writing exercise. I know your hand is probably getting a little bit tired by now. Before we move on to the next exercise, we're just going to show you a short clip, because the next exercise is about democracy. In the call for stories for the anthology Power, we've indicated that we would like in some way the stories to reflect a celebration of democracy. But that does not mean the stories all have to be happy. So in the next exercise, I'm going to ask you to write about democracy, what it means to you. But first, Trish, if we can just watch that very short clip, it's about 1.5 minutes, just to take us back in time, take us right back to the beginning of South African democracy, to our great Nelson Mandela.
The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. We commit ourselves to the construction of a complete, just, and lasting peace. We understand it still that there is no easy road to freedom. We know it well that none of us acting alone can achieve success. We must therefore act together as a united people for national reconciliation, for nation building, for the birth of a new world. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. I thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So we are using a few props this time. For those that came in late, we played a video of Lyra singing that beautiful, powerful song, Something Inside So Strong. So please go and look that up. Because basically, where does fiction come from? It comes from real life. It comes from our own experience. It comes from within. It comes from what we see, what we hear, the times that we're living in. And although it is fictionalized, we're making up the stories. They've got to be authentic. And really that comes from what we have experienced in our lives. So you might have very vastly different responses to that segment. For me, democracy means everyone has a vote, that the Constitution protects the rights of all. A person can come out as gay or transgender and not be persecuted, at least not by the government, because the rights are protected of every person in the Constitution. But how has democracy supported you, and how has democracy failed you? We need to, again, express both sides of the coin, or at least look at both sides in order to understand what it means for us. So perhaps your story is going to be an underlying expression of your disappointment, which also, in a sense, is expressing your power, particularly as we consider that in autocratic countries or dictatorships, activists are often jailed for simply expressing an opinion, for writing the truth. And let's remember too that back in apartheid South Africa, books and movies were banned just because they criticized the apartheid government. the censors used terms like sedition, blasphemy, and obscenity to justify their actions. They banned books that they considered were mixing races or criticizing the government, all those things that we have the right to do these days, and nobody can throw us in jail for doing it. In 1964, for example, Cape Town City Library Services announced that more than 800 books had been burned. Imagine that. I can just imagine that bonfire of books, including works by Nadine Gordimer, Alex Laguma, Andre Brink, so many others. So I think the point is that when writing your story, I'm not particularly, and our readers are not going to be looking for stories of democracy or happy stories. Wow, we live in a democracy. But in some way, power is related to the fact that we are allowed our own power. We are allowed to write whatever we want. We can write whatever stories we want. And for me, that is exciting. So when people have asked me about, yes, but how does democracy fit into this whole short shop stories project of power, light the dark? That's really what I'd like you to consider, is what democracy means to you, but your story does not have to be a democracy. I know that that sounds kind of complicated, and that's why I'd like you to spend a few minutes writing about it. Again, just 5 minutes or so this time, what democracy means to you, and perhaps in some way you'll be bringing it into your story, or it will form a shadow to your story, because everything that we're writing now will most likely not go into your story. It is simply a way to understand better your views on power, powerlessness, democracy, values, and perhaps that's going to color your story in some way. So I'll see you on the other side of 5 minutes or so. Thanks, everybody. Okay, thanks everybody. I hope that you managed to write about democracy and perhaps were surprised by whatever came up for you. Remember that whatever is in these exercises is for your eyes only. It is, sorry, start my video. Hi. Sorry, was there a glitch there, Trish? Or is everything fine?
All good. It's working.
Oh, all good. Great. Okay, now I just saw a little message popping up on my screen that I had to start my video. So I'm not sure what you heard or not, but basically what these exercises we've done are for is to just write about and explore some of our beliefs. As I've said, not many people sit down and simply start a story and write it from beginning to end. So these exercises are a way of loosening ideas. It is background material. And as I said, fiction is influenced by what we have experienced in our lives, by our personalities, by what we've read, what's important to us. And even though our beliefs are ever changing, they do influence our stories. And again, that word authenticity, the more we feel our characters, the more we can step into their shoes, the better. Even sometimes if those characters are people we don't like. But by understanding what makes a good character and understanding what makes an authentic character, which is really the feeling, the emotion of that character, we write better stories. So it is now time to have a cup of tea, or rather go and make a cup of tea, fetch whatever you need. I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 minutes for that. So it's now kind of 3 minutes to 3. So kind of 2 minutes past 3 on the dot. We're going to start with another exercise. So I will see you in 5 minutes. Okay, hi everybody. We're back. I hope you're refreshed. I hope you have got yourselves a cup of tea. Yeah, I was going to say a glass of wine. Maybe it's a little bit early, but of course there is rugby today, so we can start to celebrate. And that is kind of part of our democracy as well, that we have these opportunities to just absolutely relish what our democracy has given us. And, you know, I do think of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine at the moment. And I'm not going to discuss that in any detail, but I do think that when it comes to religion, we are so lucky in the sense that we have a secular society and that we accept so many different kinds of people and that there is space for so many different kinds of people. And every person is protected in our constitution. So that for me is the exciting thing about a democracy. On my break as well, I was wondering how we could share our writing, but we actually decided, All About Writing and I together, that there are just too many people on this workshop to actually include the writing and to give anyone a chance to share their writing by reading. But I also thought this is a real experience of what being a writer is all about. It's basically sitting at your computer, coming up with an idea, writing into it until the pen runs dry, reading it, perhaps loosening an idea about something else, moving on to the next thing. And that's how we build story. And it takes time. And that's why we believe in rewriting, in editing, in honing our stories. So we are now going to move on to the next set of writing exercises. And this has much more to do with actually writing a short story. So with reference to downloading your story, writing to specification with a set of limits, and that's what a competition is helpful for. It helps you to crystallize your thought as you construct a channel through which your ideas can flow. And I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about being focused in order to uncover and loosen those ideas, to bring them to the fore, which often only happens with the act of writing. Just to use another example, it's a little bit like being an archaeologist, sitting out there in the dirt of the desert and digging away, finding the shape of something and uncovering it, getting the dust off slowly with a brush, with a palette knife, until finally you have a shape in front of you. So this is not paint by numbers version of story writing, what we're going to do next, but it is a way to make the writing seem less frightening and more like a process, which it really is, because it all takes work. And sometimes a story doesn't come to us in a flash. It can sometimes. It's happened to me probably once in my life. But most of the time, I have got to tease it out. I get an idea that excites me, and I start to write into that idea. And the actual process of writing brings up other ideas. It brings up interesting sentences and interesting images, which I then go on to explore. So what we're going to do now is work with character. And we really believe that that's where story resides. The more interesting, the more rounded our characters are, the more the reader believes in our characters, because they're not cardboard cut out mannequins that are sitting in a shop store window. They're real people. And what we want to do is try and create those real people from the get-go and invest those characters with believability right from the start. And this is the problem with the short story. You don't have a lot of time. You don't have the possibility of building in pages and pages of backstory. You've got to almost present that character as a fait accompli, almost right from the first sentence. So what I want you to do now is to choose a main character, a protagonist, the protagonist being the main point of view character, often the hero of the story, the person from whose point of view the story will unfold. The story will be told from what they see and experience. And a protagonist is neither good nor bad, but they see the story happening from where they are in time and place. There are all sorts of ways to write a point of view. It can be the I point of view. It can be the omniscient. But for our purposes, I think we're going to use the third person today. So that is she, he, and they. So think of a character. It can be based on someone in real life to make it easier. And I think fiction writers often do this. Something interests us about a character that we know, or someone we've seen, or maybe just the waiter in the cafe down the road who's got a particular way of walking. So I want you to just think of somebody. It can be a real person, or it can be someone you pull from your mind. But in my experience, that, again, fiction comes from real life. So I want you to just write about your character. Again, just consider this an exercise. Don't agonize over it. Just choose a person. Where do they live? What are their passions? What are their features? What are their gestures? Does your character have a weird hobby like embalming animals? Does your character work? What sort of walk does the character have? What sort of food would your character order at a restaurant? What sort of clothes does your character wear? Give your character a name. Does this character have an enemy? What crisis is this character facing? Needs, desires, fears are what make a character believable. I've been quoting Kurt Vonnegut quite a lot lately, and here I go again. He says, make your characters want something right away, even if it's only a glass of water. And there's a second part to this quote that goes, even the characters paralyzed by the meaningless of life have to have a glass of water from time to time. So what he means by this is to emphasize the importance of the motivation of your character. And that motivation is completely connected to beliefs, values, to who they are intrinsically, to how they handle life. And for this theme, how they experience power or lack of power. And that's where I'm hoping that the exercises that you've done earlier are going to come into building a character. Again, don't put too much weight on it. This might be a story that you want to ultimately submit, but for the purposes of this workshop, it's really an exercise. So remembering that motivation is what drives stories forward. What is the motivation of your character? And what are the details of the character? So write, she is this, he is a blonde, they love music, whatever, and just see where it goes. Again, just allow your brain to download whatever material is there and keep the pen going. keep the fingers typing, and invent a protagonist, your main point of view character. And for that, I'm giving you 10 minutes. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, thanks everybody. So I hope that you all have a protagonist whom you find interesting, whom you can move into your story as you write, and you'll probably discover more about this character as you write. But for the next exercise, what I'm going to ask you to do is to create an antagonist. This is the opposing force who stands in the way of the main character's goals. The antagonist is also neither good nor bad, but let's face it, the antagonist is often the baddie or the villain, but it doesn't have to be so. As an example, if I created a character, I might describe, let's say, a female character as my protagonist. I'd write about who she is in some detail and conclude that her marriage is in trouble. Her motivation is that she wants out of the marriage. She's going back to mama. Perhaps she's pregnant. All of those things will filter into the story. My protagonist then could be the husband. Again, what are his defining characteristics and traits? Does he wear patent leather brogues or tackies? Is he an undertaker or a council worker? Does he have a mole on his chin? What are his needs? What does he want? Perhaps this husband won't accept his wife's decision to leave him. Perhaps this is where the power imbalance lies. So you can see how story starts with character and what happens between characters. So just for the next 8 minutes or so, I'd like you to focus on your antagonist. Who in your story is going to challenge your protagonist? Who are you going to bring into the story who's going to be challenging, someone who she's going to have to, well, I'm thinking of my story now, someone who brings a new dimension to the story and brings some sort of power imbalance to the story. So I will see you on the other side of 8 minutes. The protagonist does not need as much time as our main character, who we are really going to be invested in as we write our stories. Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the room, everybody. So you have two characters. You have a protagonist, you have your antagonist. Perhaps something is already starting to happen between them, or some kind of underlying power imbalance is being shown. So what we're going to do now is I'd like you to create a setting and place your characters in the setting. And a setting is really a place that you want to explore in your writing. Do you live in a rural town, in a shack or a mansion or a semi in Woodstock or an apartment or a township? Use what you know. You have to place your people, your characters, and I like to consider them as people because that's what they become to us. You have to place them in context. And that context, that setting, is going to influence who they are and what they do. So if you live in, let's say, a thatched hut in a rural village, it's going to be very different from living in a flat in the Joburg city center. In a village, there'll be paths, grass, a local store where parcels may be delivered to pep stores. If your setting is Joburg, you'll describe the traffic, potholes in the street, men at robots painted silver. Perhaps there's some crime element to your story. What I'm trying to get at is try and create a setting that is specific and try and see it with some detail. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like your character to see the setting. So I want to see the setting as a reader from your character's point of view. So in other words, place your protagonist, your point of view character in a setting, and then again, tease it out. What does your character see, smell, hear? What are the details of the place that make it come alive? And just to go back to my example of the husband and wife, perhaps my setting might be a train. Perhaps this wife might want to get away from her overbearing husband. And perhaps she has run away from him and put herself on a train. She's heading to mama. What does she see on the train? Are the seats leather or plastic? Is there a rip in a seat? Is it the overnight Shosholoza train up to Mamelodi, or is she catching a train somewhere else? What does she bring with her? Does she manage to make herself some sandwiches, or did she leave in a hurry and bring just a few precious items with her? So take your protagonist and place them in a setting. It could be a room, it could be a home, as long as you try and imbue the scene with some details that make it authentic. And we're just going to spend 5 minutes on that. I'm keeping my eye on the time. So just choose a setting. Again, don't agonize over it. And I'll see you on the other side. Okay, thanks everyone. All right, I hope that you are feeling some kind of progression, that your characters are revealing themselves to you, that perhaps in your mind as a writer, there's a sense of story starting to happen, because story does happen between characters. Setting also releases story, so there are all sorts of ways into the story. So what I'd like you to do next is to bring in your antagonist, clearly, the other character you sketched out. In my case, I would bring in the husband. Perhaps he'd jump on the train just as it was about to leave the station. So you have your two characters in a setting. You have an idea of power, what it means to you as the writer. You have an idea of the power struggle or imbalance between your characters. So obviously, what happens next? As an example, let's say my characters, this husband and wife, they're now both on the train. But remember, this is a short story. It's not just a trip on a train. I can write a beautiful 3,000 words on the trip itself. But to make it a short story, something has to happen. And those words, what happened next, are like gold when it comes to writing a short story, because we want the story to progress in some way. Again, it doesn't have to be skop, skiet en donder. It can be a very subtle story. There can be some kind of underlying story that's going on between the characters, between their personalities. It could be action-driven. In your setting, when you are going to write your own story now, put your characters together and see what kind of relationship they have and what kind of a story is going to develop. So what do they say to each other? What do they do? Again, we don't have to know where they were yesterday or last week. In my story, for example, the reader does not have to know that my couple had a big fancy wedding or that they had slept together before marriage. It's enough to know that they are right here, right now, on the train. And that's the difference between a novel and a short story. In a novel, there's time to detour and explain and talk about how these characters came to be who they are. But in a short story, I've placed my characters on a train because I know my characters quite well, because I've done a character sketch. I know how they would react. I know the kind of words they would use in dialogue. I know who they are intrinsically. And that's what we want to convey in a short story. And we want to get our short stories going almost immediately. We're writing in the action, which is called in medias res. So we are writing the story, not the backstory. So another limit of this mini story is that it's going to happen in one place on one day. To explain a little bit more about the backstory, it too will leave a shadow if you know your character well enough. And this is one of the major problems that I have with the stories that are submitted to Short Shop Stories, is that too often writers start a story with 3 or 4 pages of background material, of where the character grew up, where they went to school, why they became the person they are. We really don't need any of this in a short story. What we want to do is we want to get to the crunch. Who is this character? Because we know them already through our exploration. We know how they will react to their antagonist. So remember what motivates your lead character, your point of view character, and build up in this next section to some kind of climax, some kind of conflict or turning point. I want to say something as well about the term inciting incident. And there are other terms as well that we use as probably more experienced writers, the hero's journey, etc. And you can read up about all of these concepts. But basically, the way I understand an inciting incident is that it's the event that sets a story's main character on their journey. So for instance, the inciting incident in my story between this husband and wife could be that that she wants a divorce and she brings home the divorce papers, and the husband rips them apart in front of his wife. But The inciting incident does not have to be at the start of your story. The inciting incident, or the why, the event that upset the character's life and forces her to take action, the catalyst that's got her going, that's got her to get on the train and move to Mama's house, can be remembered in a later scene or can be discussed by the characters. And this is the beauty of a short story. We don't need all of that history, certainly not at the beginning of the story. So with all of that background information, I'd like you now to just play with your characters. You're putting them together. You're bringing your antagonist into your setting. What happens? Again, I'm just going to quote Kurt Vonnegut. He says, somebody gets into trouble, then gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get tired of it. So what trouble comes to your main character, and how ultimately does your character deal with it? Again, write for 5 or 6 minutes and try and build up to some kind of turning point. So it could be a conversation between your characters. What happens next? All right, you'll hear my little alarm in 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, thanks everybody. So what we're dealing with basically is cause and effect. If one thing happens, then there is a consequence, an effect. And a short story is often a series of cause and effect until the end. So in my example, perhaps the wife is about to give birth. That's why she ran from the overbearing husband in the first place. Perhaps she realized he couldn't be the father she wanted him to be. The husband has followed her onto the train, and perhaps she gets off at the next station. Perhaps her waters break. Perhaps it's a seminal moment for the two of them. They decide to reconcile because basically the husband has got to help deliver the baby. Who knows? There are all sorts of possibilities to explore. So what I'd like you to do just in the last 5 minutes or so is to just look at what's happened in your story between your characters in that particular setting and to write what happens next. What is the cause? What is the effect? And to bring it all to some kind of resolution. We are kind of rushing this process a little bit, but I'm hoping it just gives you a sense of how to move a story forward, how to put those characters in a setting, and how everything that you've written about before will somehow seep into it. And if it doesn't seep in today, it might seep in tomorrow if you rework your story, or next week if you write a different story with different characters. So the last 5 minutes, what happens next, and bring your mini story to some kind of resolution. And I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, you might be relieved to know that that was the last alarm of the day. The wise owl is now being switched off until Monday at some stage. So basically what we've done is we've loosened a lot of ideas, probably very rough ideas from the first section where we dealt with what are our ideas, what are our beliefs around power as a writer, to rough ideas of a story, of creating character. And perhaps you have created characters that you're interested in and that you'd like to go home, take home with you and explore by further writing. But my hope is that in some way, this has just loosened ideas for you, but also that it gives you an experience of understanding that writing is a process. And this is really for the new writers. For us hardened writers, we already know that it's a process. And what we'd probably like to say to the newbies is don't do it, run a mile, because it's difficult. It takes a lot of commitment, it takes dedication, but it's also really incredibly satisfying when a story does come together. And I think the most satisfying part of it is actually through the writing, experiencing the surprises that come through the writing, that once you finish, perhaps you look at your paragraph or your section and you say, that was interesting. I didn't think I'd be writing about that. And these things only happen when we do put pen to paper. Often we lie in bed, we imagine that we can bring a story to our minds, that if we can only imagine the story in full, it'll make it easier. But really the story is going to, and perhaps this is where the magic lies, the story is going to download through the actual process of writing. And once one starts writing a story, the subconscious mind also plays with the ideas. So you might find that whatever you've written today, your mind is going to play with these ideas, is going to fill in the blanks. You might infuse your dreams with whatever you've written, which might help you move your story forward. Perhaps these exercises have clarified some questions that you have around the theme and also around how to get into writing a short story, because it's something people often come to me and they say, but how do I start? How do I just get into the short story? That's what I want to know. And too often we do wait for that inspiration instead of actually sitting down and starting something and allowing it to happen. And of course, I haven't spoken about dialogue, about all the other aspects of style, more on point of view, detail showing, not telling, that cornerstone of fiction writing, which we discussed briefly in our Q&A. And we will be looking at all of those aspects of writing in the next workshop. Dialogue, someone did ask a question in the chat. Of course, it moves story forward, but there are many other ways to skin a cat. You can write a story without dialogue. That is the simple answer, and I will come back to that in the next session. But I hope that this has been an experience for you in the writing, and even the seasoned writers, perhaps you had some surprises on your side. I think the bottom line is as well is none of us have the answers. No writing teachers can tell you exactly how to write a story. And for me, that again comes to the actual act of writing itself. That's why when I call this an experiential writing workshop, it's really about you coming with your open hearts and your pens and allowing the characters to come to you. And again, it's not magic. It all comes from reality, from what you've been through, from your own lives, from what you know about power, from your experience of power imbalances. But this is the beauty of fiction. We get to embroider, we get to make things up, we get to explore scenarios that we wouldn't usually be able to explore. We get to write stories. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Just one last thing I want to say is that the best way to learn about writing short stories is clearly to read lots of short stories. We're having a special on One Life, the new short stories anthology, and Trish will send details when this recording goes out. We're selling it at 270 Rand, which is 50 Rand off the recommended retail price. It'll be 320 Rand in store. And if you would like to order your copy, we'll also be sending you one of our previous anthologies, a surprise mystery anthology, and that'll help you as well, just to see what kind of stories we like. The other thing is, perhaps I shouldn't say that, what stories we like. We're not looking for anything in particular, apart from interesting stories, interesting characters, perhaps something original. But really, that's up to you. I don't want to ever place this burden on you as a writer that you have to please us in any way. What you need to do is please yourself first and foremost. Write a story that appeals to you, that on a gut level speaks to you. Write about a character that you feel connected with in some way. Place yourself in that character's shoes. You might have to place yourself in the antagonist's shoes too. See what happens between them. And always remember that very helpful phrase, what happens next? You can make lists of what happens next and choose scenes, choose scenarios to write about. And ultimately, that will lead you to the resolution of your story, because clearly a story needs to have a resolution. And then again, just to repeat that a short story is really about what happens towards getting to the end of that short story. It's not just about sitting on the train describing the beautiful scenery. Something has to happen between the characters. And it is now 4 o'clock. We can all go and have our glass of vino or our beer, and we can paint our faces for the rugby. And who knows, maybe a story is going to come to you this afternoon about something completely different. But thank you so much for attending, and I hope it was helpful. And please send us some feedback, and perhaps you have some comments or something that you would like specifically to be covered in the next workshop, and we'll deal with that. So adieu until next week. And thank you very much for being with us. And thank you to All About Writing. Thank you, Trish. And remember, All About Writing has got fantastic writing courses as well. Great.